Rick Johnston. I'm the Vice President at Automotive Technologies. Started in the car business in 1999 and sold vehicles for Honda West in Calgary for about 7 years, and then a couple more dealerships. Eventually went on to work for Quorum Information Systems, DMS, and traveled North America, taught dealers how to use their system for a couple of years, and then moved into a sort of a sweeper role, I used to call it. I kind of did a whole bunch of everything: sales, marketing, development. Did that for 5 or 6 years, and then started Autovance. Built Autovance up for 7 years, and eventually exited to Quorum last year, September last year. And so now I'm back on with the senior manager with Quorum and running Autovance. I don't know if I necessarily wanted to print my own worksheet, but I just know that I had a lot of success in selling accessories. And one of the things that Honda West did is they gave us this little booklet, and it had a picture of all the accessories with the price. And I used to, flip to the Civic page and turn it around and show the customer, and I would literally walk through. And it was a really interactive selection process with the customer. And I sold tons of accessories, and the customers liked it. So I think that maybe subconsciously, maybe not consciously, I learned from that experience that customers enjoyed that engaged sort of buying process. And so as I went on to sort of work on the worksheet, it felt like that was natural. What I kind of thought about it in the first place, I remember I actually had done a presentation for a dealer group in Florida or something to that effect, and they had asked me how could we get finance and lease payments to print on the same sheet of paper, and they wanted a variety of down payments and terms, and it was just something that we couldn't do in the product that I was demoing them, and it didn't seem like it would be that hard to do. And I had so many questions over the years while I was at Quorum about, can we customize the worksheet? We want to, I remember Davis and Lethbridge wanted their own worksheet customized for years, and I couldn't deliver it for them. So I set out in Excel to not build necessarily a program to do it, but to build like some sheet of paper, kind of. I don't know. I don't even really know. And really all I wanted to do was make sure that I could calculate finance and lease payments inside this worksheet. And so that's kind of how the first iteration of it started. And I had this sort of very early prototype that I had kind of been picking away at. And I went to have dinner with a friend of mine in Calgary. My wife and I did, and I showed it to him. And at the time, he was a used car manager at Honda West, and he said, "Oh, this is killer, man! But like, if you could make it so it did this for Honda, like let us pick the Honda car, and it had the right interest rates and residuals, and then printed that sheet, oh, we'd buy this from you." So then I was like, oh. So then I actually had sort of the secondary piece, which is the worksheet, which to me was the most important piece. And then I had to build the inputs, I had to build the software on top of that in order for them to be able to do that. So that's kind of what I set out on a mission to do. And over the course of maybe, 6 months and 3,000 Google searches, we did that. So. Exactly that question that I got asked. It was 3 terms, 3 down payments, finance and lease, and it was just both boom boom. It was just like 2 sections, and it was pretty fixed. It did one thing, I mean, you could change the terms and you could change the down payments, but it was just one model of presenting payments, and it was 18 payments. So I remember the first video I did to tell dealers about it. In the video, I can almost hear myself because I read the script 1,000 times, right? When you go to print the worksheet, you get 3 terms, 3 down payments for finance, 3 terms, 3 down payments for lease, and so 18 payments. So that was how it looked. That's a good question. Well, I think that like every process, if we think about how many people buy their TV from Amazon and then how many people buy their TV from Costco, I still think the better percentage of people are buying their TV from Costco. And so as much as I definitely want to be on the leading edge of moving to online retailing, I think we can't forget about the fact that traditional retailing still occurs and is still 90+% of the transactions that take place, and we need to try and correct that model as best we can today. So I think so many people are ahead of themselves trying to solve tomorrow's problems and forgetting about today's, and that's why I think the worksheet is so important, because I still think 90+% of the transactions occur in the store. Yeah, I mean, I think not only has there been things I've rejected, I mean, so my default, and anybody who has been a long time customer of Autovance will know that my default answer is no, we're not doing that. Like, it's just, I really believe in this model of kind of no first before I say yes. And the reason is that if somebody asks for a feature, I'll give you an example, like Tom Lynn at Henley Honda asked me for accessories in Autovance, in the matrix and that, and I was like, no, it's not happening. And then a week later, Tom phoned me back and was like, bro, you got to do accessories. And I was like, I can't do it, Tom. It's too much work. It's, I can't do it. And my thinking is that if I say no and they don't keep pushing, it really wasn't that important. And so software, as a result of not saying no initially, tends to become this sort of cesspool of feature requests that's so hard to learn, doesn't make sense to new users because too many people just say yes along the way, right? So anyway, the third call from Tom was not that nice. It was 2 weeks later, and he was like, bro, if you want to sell this thing, it's got to have accessories. And I knew at that point I had to do accessories. So I say no lots to lots of features, some that get lots of requests, but at the end of the day, if it's really that important, enough people will continue to ask for it, or the people that have asked for it will put enough pressure on us that we have to do it, or we have to make a really difficult decision, and that happens sometimes too. So. Much the same of accessories. I made a trip out to Toronto and met with Tom at Henley Honda and Alex DeGenis, and I remember it was one of the first things they said, look, this is cool, the 9 and 9 or the finance and lease and the ability to print just finance or just lease, but it would be better for us if we had less focus on a whole bunch of the little numbers like residual, due upon signing, and more focus just on big payments. And it was actually sort of in working with those guys that we came up with the 6 and 6, which is 3 finance, 3 lease, 1 down and another down, and the idea being that big focus on payment and a nice secondary set of payments there, so when the customer says, oh geez, I wanted to be at this much, we can use that down as a guide to say, well, you're probably going to need $3,000 or $4,000 down, right? So that was how the 6 and 6 came to be. We did the 12 and 12 for another dealer, and then really it wasn't very long before we needed to come up with a way to just give them the ability to print whichever payments they wanted to show the customer, right? I mean, and that's really powerful, like you said, in that Honda West uses it that way, in that they'll present 3 finance and a lease, or 3 lease and a finance, or you get the flexibility to kind of print what you want to. I say this often, but worksheets, desking tools are built by most software companies as an afterthought to some other product. So the desking tool might be to manage the rates and the residuals and the rebates and all the sort of things that a desking tool needs to be able to do. And then somebody went, oh, by the way, it's got a print. So then they go and they just collect either a little bit of information, like just one payment, and they spit it out on a worksheet, or they collect all the information and they just produce this like worksheet that's got like a bazillion payment options on it, right? And so one of the things that's unique at Autovance is that we didn't think about the software, the desking tool first, and then built the worksheet. We built the worksheet, and then we tied the software into the worksheet. So our focus has always been the worksheet. Pretty much every desking tool can generate a lease payment, but it has to be told to. I think, especially in the domestic world, we've fallen into a habit of like 98.5%, or even 3 or 4 years ago, 100% of our deals were all finances because our manufacturers weren't backing leasing. Maybe that's longer than that now. Maybe it's 10 years ago, but time flies. But so the systems then got built to generate a finance payment, and then if you told it you instead wanted a lease payment, then it would give you that instead of the finance payment. So I think with Autovance, one of the reasons that we were able to help dealers lease more vehicles is that it's not something you have to tell it to do. It just intuitively does the lease payment alongside the finance payment, and gives you the flexibility to produce a worksheet that gives the customer, 3 or 4 payment options, 3 finance and a lease, and then it happens in like less than 2 minutes, a minute and a half, maybe a minute, depends on how good you are. So it's it kind of by default, it's like leasing's not an afterthought with Autovance. It's part of the deal. And so I challenge dealers and say, like, I get the fear, right? The fear is that, well, my business office isn't going to get the revenue that we would normally get out of a finance contract because we don't have as much net to finance, right? Everything goes into the front half of the lease, and so your payment inflates higher when you throw $3,000 or $4,000 worth of aftermarket there, right? But I think the same argument can be made for the fact that even though there's maybe not as much per vehicle F&I on a lease, there's more leases or there's more transactions, right? We put people into a buying cycle, and not only are we trying to retain them with the existing manufacturer, so if we've got a GM buyer, we're keeping them in the GM family on a lease, really, really high percentage they stay on a GM, but we also have a really good chance at retaining their business at a set time. So you could actually think about some of that money that you're losing on F&I, right? Maybe you're using you're saving that in marketing spend to try and pull those customers back in. That's one way to look at it. Or, and I think an argument I make a lot is when you lease a vehicle, boy, it's hard to think you're not going to follow the service schedule right to the T. I mean, there's a chance you might want to return that car. Yeah. You better have done the maintenance. So, yeah, there's lots of money to be made on leasing. It's just, it just doesn't sometimes appear the same. Leasing has a bad rap in the market because it was bad for a long time. I mean, leasing to consumers represented a really bad way to buy a vehicle for a long time, and then it came back and it's better today than it ever has been. And if you don't show a customer a lease payment, I think unless you're in the luxury import business, you got a less than 3 or 4% chance they're walking in asking you to lease that car. So, or truck for that matter.